The early morning sun streamed through the tall windows of O'Hare International Airport as Maya Johnson wheeled her small carry-on suitcase across the polished floor. The airport buzzed with the usual morning rush. Business travelers clutching coffee cups, families herding sleepy children, and airline staff moving with purpose through the crowds. Maya checked her watch and smiled. She was right on time, 2 hours before her flight to Atlanta, where she would present her marketing team's new campaign to a potential client. At 34, Maya had worked her way up to become one of the top marketing executives at her firm. This meeting could mean a major account for her company, and she had spent weeks preparing for it. She joined the check-in line, scrolling through her phone to double-check her presentation one last time. Her boarding pass was already downloaded in her airline app, a habit from years of business travel. When her turn came, Maya approached the counter with a warm smile. "Good morning," she said, placing her ID on the counter and pulling up her digital ticket on her phone. "Flight 372 to Atlanta." The airline employee, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, glanced at Maya's phone screen and then began typing into her computer. Her fingers paused and she frowned slightly. "Just one moment, please," she said, picking up a phone and speaking quietly into it. Maya checked her watch again. She wasn't worried. Probably just a routine check or maybe a gate change. She'd flown hundreds of times for work over the years without issue. But something felt off when the employee avoided making eye contact. Within minutes, 2 security officers appeared beside the counter, their faces serious. One was a tall man with a crew cut, the other a stocky woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside with us," the male officer said, his voice carrying enough that several nearby passengers turned to look. Maya blinked in surprise. "Is there a problem?" "We need to discuss your ticket, ma'am," he said, gesturing to a side area away from the line. Confused but cooperative, Maya followed them to a quieter spot near a wall. Her mind raced. Had there been some mistake with her booking? Was there an issue with the flight? "Your ticket appears to be fraudulent," the female officer stated bluntly. Maya stared at them in disbelief. "What? No, that's impossible. I booked this flight 3 weeks ago through my company's travel portal." The male officer's expression hardened. "Our system has flagged your documentation as potentially fake. We'll need to verify your information." Maya felt her heart begin to race, but she kept her voice calm. "There must be some mistake. Look, I can show you the confirmation email and the charge on my credit card." She pulled up her email app and found the booking confirmation, turning her phone screen toward them. The female officer barely glanced at it. "Anyone can create a fake email," she said dismissively. "We're going to need you to come with us for further questioning." By now, several people were openly staring. Maya felt heat rising to her face, but years of handling difficult business situations had taught her to stay composed under pressure. "I'm happy to clarify any confusion," she said evenly. "But I assure you my ticket is legitimate. I've been flying with this airline for years." The male officer stepped closer. "Ma'am, either you come with us voluntarily or we'll have to escort you." Maya looked around, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on her. An older white couple whispered to each other while looking in her direction. A young man had his phone out, possibly recording. The implication was clear. She was being treated like a criminal in a very public space. "I'll come with you," she said quietly. "But I want to be clear that there's been a mistake." They led her through the terminal, one officer in front and one behind, as if she might try to escape. Maya kept her head high, but inside, humiliation and confusion battled for dominance. What was happening? She'd done nothing wrong. They brought her to a small room with no windows, just a table and 3 chairs. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows, making the space feel even more unwelcoming. "Please have a seat," the female officer directed, closing the door behind them. Maya sat down, placing her phone and ID on the table. "Can you please explain what's going on? I've shown you my confirmation. I can log into my bank account and show you the charge as well." The male officer remained, standing, arms crossed. "Our system has identified anomalies in your ticket's QR code that are consistent with counterfeit boarding passes. We take security very seriously." "So do I," Maya replied. "Which is why I'm trying to help clear this up." What specific anomalies are you talking about? Instead of answering, the female officer said, "How did you purchase this ticket?" Maya took a deep breath. "As I mentioned, through my company's corporate travel portal. I do this almost every month." "And who is your employer?" "Thompson and Burke, marketing. I'm an executive director there. Here's my business card." She reached for her wallet, but the male officer held up his hand. "Please keep your hands visible on the table," he said sharply. Maya slowly placed her hands flat on the table, a chill running through her. Why were they treating her like this? She watched as they examined her ID card closely. "This appears to be in order," the female officer admitted reluctantly. "Because I haven't done anything wrong," Maya said. "Look, my flight leaves in an hour. Can we please resolve this quickly? I have an important meeting in Atlanta this afternoon." The male officer leaned forward. "Ma'am, presenting fraudulent documentation at an airport is a federal offense. This isn't something we quickly resolve." Maya felt a flicker of real fear now. "I understand the seriousness, which is why I'm telling you there's been a mistake. Please check your system again. My name is Maya Johnson. I booked the ticket weeks ago. It's a direct flight to Atlanta leaving at 9:45 a.m. The officers exchanged glances. The female officer left the room with Maya's ID, leaving her alone with the male officer, who stood silently watching her. Minutes ticked by. Maya thought about the meeting she might miss, about the team counting on her. She thought about calling her boss, but wasn't sure if she was allowed to use her phone. The room felt smaller by the minute. When the door finally opened again, a third person entered, a man in a suit rather than a uniform, who introduced himself as the security supervisor. "Ms. Johnson, I understand there's an issue with your boarding pass," he said, his tone slightly more professional than the officer's. "There's been a misunderstanding," Maya explained again, fighting to keep the frustration from her voice. "I have a legitimate ticket that I purchased weeks ago." He nodded, looking at a tablet he held. "We're checking that now. In the meantime, can you tell me the purpose of your travel today?" Maya explained about her business meeting, the client, her role at the company. As she spoke, she noticed the supervisor's expression shift slightly. "And you say you purchased this through a corporate portal? Which service does your company use?" "Travel Pro Business. We have a corporate account. All our company travel goes through them." The supervisor typed something into his tablet, then looked up. "We've been having some issues with tickets purchased through certain third-party vendors. Their QR codes sometimes register differently in our new security system." For the first time, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. "So this could be a technical issue with your system, not my ticket?" "Possibly," he admitted. "But we still need to verify." More waiting. Maya watched the minutes tick by on the clock on the wall. Her flight would be boarding soon. Even if they cleared this up immediately, would she make it? Finally, after nearly 40 minutes in the small room, the supervisor returned with her ID and a printout. "Ms. Johnson, it appears there was a system error. Your ticket is valid." Relief washed over her. "Thank you for confirming that. However," he continued, checking his watch, "your flight has already begun boarding. You'll need to hurry if you want to make it." Maya stood quickly, gathering her belongings. "So I'm free to go to my gate?" "Yes," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Sorry for the inconvenience." Inconvenience. The word hardly covered what had just happened. Maya had been publicly treated like a criminal, questioned for nearly an hour, and nearly missed her flight, all because of a system error. She rushed through the terminal, weaving between travelers, her heart pounding. When she reached the gate, the final boarding call was being announced. Breathless, she handed her phone to the gate agent, who scanned her boarding pass without issue. The same pass that security had claimed was fake. As Maya walked down the jetway, the adrenaline began to wear off, replaced by a heavy feeling in her chest. What had really happened back there? Would the same system error have affected a white business traveler? Would they have been led through a crowded airport like a suspect and questioned for an hour? She found her seat and stowed her bag with shaking hands. A businessman in the aisle seat barely looked up as she settled into the window seat. He had no idea what she'd just been through. Maya looked out at the airport, the reality of the situation sinking in. She had nearly missed an important meeting because airline security had profiled her. There was no other explanation that made sense. As the plane began to taxi, she took out her phone and opened the Notes app. With detailed precision, she began documenting everything that had happened: times, names, exact quotes. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time the plane lifted off the ground, Maya had made a decision. She wouldn't let this incident be forgotten or dismissed as a simple inconvenience. Someone needed to be held accountable, and she was just the person to make sure that happened. Maya sat in her hotel room in Atlanta, staring at her laptop screen but not really seeing it. The meeting with the potential client had gone well enough. She'd managed to push aside the morning's events and focus on her presentation. But now, alone in her room, the feelings she'd suppressed came rushing back. Her phone buzzed with a text from her boss. "Great job today. Client seems very interested. Let's discuss when you're back." She typed a quick reply, not mentioning what had happened at the airport. How could she explain it? Would her boss understand the humiliation, the fear, the anger that still bubbled beneath her professional exterior? Maya opened her Notes app and looked at the detailed account she'd written on the plane. Reading it again made her stomach knot with tension. The dismissive tone of the officers, the public spectacle of being escorted through the terminal, the assumption of guilt despite her explanations. It all pointed to one thing. She'd been profiled. Treated as suspicious not because of any real issue with her ticket, but because of who she was, a black woman traveling alone. The system error explanation didn't hold water. If there truly was a technical issue with tickets purchased through corporate portals, why hadn't the airline sent out notifications? Why wasn't there an announcement at check-in warning passengers? And most importantly, why had the gate agent scanned the exact same digital ticket without any problems? Maya paced the hotel room, her mind racing. This wasn't the first time she'd experienced discrimination while traveling, but it had never been this blatant, this disruptive, and she couldn't shake the feeling that if she didn't do something, it would happen again, to her or to someone else. She picked up her phone and called the airline's customer service number. After navigating through several automated menus, she finally reached a human. "I'd like to file a formal complaint about an incident that occurred this morning at O'Hare," Maya explained, keeping her voice steady. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. What seems to be the problem?" The representative sounded bored, as if fielding complaints was routine. Maya took a deep breath and recounted what had happened. As she spoke, she could hear the representative typing. "Notes. I see," the woman said when Maya finished. "I do apologize for your experience. I'll document this in our system. Is there anything else I can help with today?" The casual response stoked Maya's frustration. "Yes, actually, I'd like to know what actions will be taken based on my complaint. Will there be an investigation? Will someone contact me? All complaints are reviewed by our customer relations team," the representative replied, her tone unchanged. "If they determine follow-up is needed, someone will contact you within 7-10 business days. And if I don't hear anything in that time frame, you can always call back to check on the status of your complaint. Your reference number is CR78542. Maya jotted down the number. "One more thing. I'd like to request all security footage of the incident. How do I do that?" There was a pause on the line. Security footage would need to be requested through a formal legal process. Our customer service department doesn't handle those requests. Then who does? Maya pressed. "You would need to contact our legal department directly. I can transfer you to their voicemail if you'd like." Maya agreed to the transfer, left a detailed message, and hung up feeling unsatisfied. The airline's response felt designed to discourage further action. A bureaucratic maze meant to wear down complainants until they gave up. But Maya had no intention of giving up. She opened her laptop and searched for information about passenger rights. She read about the Air Carrier Access Act, about discrimination complaints to the Department of Transportation, about civil rights protections for travelers. The more she read, the more convinced she became that what had happened to her wasn't just wrong, it was potentially illegal. Her phone rang, interrupting her research. It was Liam, her friend who worked as a civil rights attorney in Chicago. "Hey, I got your text. What's this about airline security?" he asked after they exchanged greetings. Maya recounted the story again, this time including details she hadn't shared with the airline representative, the stares from other passengers, the way the officers had positioned themselves as if she might run, the stark contrast between her treatment and the routine boarding experience of other travelers. "This is serious, Maya," Liam said when she finished, "and unfortunately not uncommon. Airlines have been under scrutiny for discriminatory security practices for years, but proving it in individual cases can be challenging." "So what can I do?" Maya asked, pacing the hotel room again. "Document everything, which you've already started. Request the security footage immediately before it gets deleted. Most airports only keep footage for 30 days, sometimes less. File a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation, not just the airline, and consider whether you want to pursue legal action." Legal action? Maya hadn't thought that far ahead. "It's an option," Liam said carefully. "Not an easy one, but an option. Look, let me make some calls. I know people who specialize in this area. In the meantime, did you get the names or badge numbers of the officers involved?" Maya checked her notes. "The supervisor gave me his name, Richard Kelsey. The other two never identified themselves, and I was too shocked to ask." "That's okay. With the time and location, we should be able to identify them if needed." "And, Maya?" "Yes? Consider sharing your experience, social media, review sites, wherever. Public pressure often motivates companies to address issues they might otherwise ignore." After ending the call with Liam, Maya sat at the desk in her hotel room, her dinner growing cold beside her as she drafted a detailed account of the morning's events. She kept her tone factual rather than emotional, focusing on the timeline, the inconsistencies in the airline's explanation, and the clear, disparate treatment. She included specific details, how the female officer had dismissed her email confirmation without really looking at it, how the male officer had warned her to keep her hands visible as if she posed a threat, how other passengers had stared as she was escorted through the terminal like a criminal. When she finished writing, she read it over twice, making small edits for clarity. Then she posted it to her social media accounts, tagging the airline. Maya didn't have a huge following online, just friends, family, and professional connections. But sharing her story publicly felt important. It was a matter of record, now not something that could be buried in the airline's complaint system. She closed her laptop and finally ate her room service dinner, though it had gone cold. Tomorrow she would focus on her return flight, on the client meeting follow-up, on the normal rhythms of her work life. But this incident wouldn't be forgotten. The next morning, Maya woke to dozens of notifications on her phone. Her post had been shared hundreds of times overnight. Comments poured in, some from people expressing outrage on her behalf, others from travelers sharing similar experiences, a few questioning her account, or suggesting she must have done something to provoke the security response. She scrolled through the comments while getting ready for her day, unsure how to feel about the sudden attention. She hadn't expected her story to spread so quickly. By the time she checked out of the hotel, a local news station in Chicago had messaged her requesting an interview. 2 travel bloggers had shared her post with their followers, and most surprisingly, the airline had responded publicly, asking her to direct message them with her contact information so they could look into this matter immediately. The tone was markedly different from the customer service representative's response the night before. Public pressure was already having an effect. Maya's return flight wasn't until evening, giving her time to follow up on Liam's advice. She filed a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation, carefully filling out the online form with all the details she had documented. She sent emails to the airport authority and the TSA, requesting information about their complaint procedures, and she drafted a formal letter requesting all security footage from the incident, which Liam had advised would carry more weight if sent by certified mail from his law office rather than from her directly. As she worked, more responses to her social media post came in. One in particular caught her attention, a message from a woman named Tanya who claimed to work for the airline at O'Hare. I saw what happened to you, the message read. This isn't the first time. The new security system they installed last month has been flagging legitimate tickets left and right, but management won't acknowledge the problem. And certain officers seem to be targeting specific passengers for extra scrutiny. I can't say more publicly, but if you want to talk, message. Maya stared at the message, her heart racing. This was potentially significant, an insider confirming that there were known issues with the system. She sent Tanya a private message, suggesting they connect by phone when Maya returned to Chicago. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and emails. By the time Maya headed to the airport for her return flight, her story had been picked up by several travel and short sites. The airline had called her twice, leaving voicemails with increasingly urgent requests to discuss the situation. At the Atlanta airport, Maya approached the check-in counter with trepidation. Would the same system error flag her return ticket? Would she face another interrogation? The airline employee who helped her was excessively friendly, his smile a bit too wide as he checked her ID. "Everything looks perfect, Ms. Johnson," he said, handing back her ID. "You're all set for your flight to Chicago. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Maya wondered if he recognized her name from the social media storm, if word had come down from management to ensure she had a smooth experience this time. "No, thank you," she replied, taking her boarding pass. As she walked toward security, she noticed two airline representatives watching her from near a service desk. When they saw her looking, they quickly turned away. The security checkpoint process went smoothly. No extra screening, no questions about her documentation. It was the routine experience that travel should be, the experience that had been denied to her in Chicago. On the plane, Maya opened her laptop to find an email from Liam. He had been busy, making contacts with civil rights organizations, researching similar cases, preparing the formal request for security footage. He had also discovered something interesting. Complaints about discriminatory security practices at O'Hare had increased significantly in the past month, coinciding with the implementation of the new security system Tanya had mentioned. "This isn't just about you," his email concluded. "It's a systemic issue that's affecting many travelers. Your willingness to speak up could make a real difference." Maya closed her eyes as the plane took off, thinking about what lay ahead. She hadn't asked for this fight. All she'd wanted was to take a business trip without incident, to do her job without being treated like a criminal because of her race. But now that the fight had found her, she wouldn't back down. The airline's sudden attention to her complaint, only after it became public, told her everything she needed to know about how these systems worked. Public pressure, legal pressure, media attention. These were the tools that could force change. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Maya opened her laptop again and began drafting responses to the media requests she'd received. Her story was gaining momentum, but it was about to become something bigger than one incident, one passenger, one airline. It was about to become a movement. 3 days after returning from Atlanta, Maya sat in Liam's office in downtown Chicago, surrounded by stacks of printed emails and legal documents. The small conference room had become their makeshift headquarters for what was quickly evolving from a personal complaint into something much larger. "I've received 17 more messages overnight," Maya said, scrolling through her phone. "All from people who say they've had similar experiences at O'Hare. Most of them are people of color." Liam nodded, making notes on his legal pad. At 45, he had been handling civil rights cases for over 15 years, but the intensity of the response to Maya's story had surprised even him. "And the airline?" he asked. "They've called every day. The last message was from someone in their executive office saying the CEO wants to speak with me directly." Maya set her phone down, rubbing her temples. The past few days had been exhausting, balancing her regular work responsibilities with the growing demands of this situation. "Don't take that call yet," Liam advised. "Not until we have more information. They're in damage control mode now, trying to contain this before it gets any bigger." But it was already getting bigger. Maya's social media post had been shared thousands of times. A hashtag had emerged, flying while black, with travelers across the country sharing their own stories of discriminatory treatment by airlines and airport security. 3 news stations had run segments on the story, and a national morning show had reached out about an interview. I never expected this kind of response, Maya admitted. I just wanted to document what happened to me. You struck a nerve, Liam said. This has been going on for years, but individual complaints get buried. When you shared your story publicly, it gave others permission to come forward too. A knock at the door interrupted them. Liam's assistant entered with a large envelope. This just arrived by courier, she said, handing it to Liam. He opened it and scanned the contents, his expression shifting from curiosity to satisfaction. The airport authority has agreed to preserve all security footage from the day of your incident, he announced. They're not releasing it yet. They want a formal subpoena, but at least they're not destroying it. That's a win. Maya felt a surge of hope. The footage would show exactly how she'd been treated, confirming her account against any attempts by the airline to downplay what had happened. What about Tanya? Liam asked. Any more contact from her? Maya nodded. We spoke by phone yesterday. She's nervous about coming forward officially, afraid of losing her job, but she shared some interesting information. Tanya had confirmed that the airline's new security system, implemented just 6 weeks earlier, had been causing problems from the start. Designed to detect fraudulent tickets, it was generating false positives at an alarming rate. Even more troubling, she revealed that the system seemed to flag tickets purchased through certain third-party vendors at a higher rate. Vendors that offered discounted fares and were popular with budget-conscious travelers. She says management knows about the issues but has been pressuring staff to treat all system flags as legitimate security concerns, Maya explained. And she's noticed that certain passengers, particularly women of color traveling alone, face more intensive questioning when their tickets are flagged. Liam made more notes. That's significant. If we can prove the system has a disproportionate impact on minority travelers, regardless of whether it was designed that way intentionally, we have a strong discrimination case. Maya's phone buzzed with another message, this one from her boss asking when she'd be back in the office. The marketing firm had been supportive so far, giving her flexibility to deal with the situation, but she couldn't put her career on hold indefinitely. I need to get back to work, she sighed. This is important, but so is my job. Of course, Liam agreed. We've made good progress today. I'll keep pushing on the legal front. You focus on your work and the public awareness aspect. As Maya gathered her things to leave, Liam added, Oh, and Maya, that TV interview request, I think you should do it. Your story is powerful and you tell it well. It could make a real difference. Maya hesitated. Going on national television would take this to another level. There would be no going back to anonymity afterward. I'll think about it, she promised. The next morning, Maya arrived at her office early, hoping to catch up on work before her colleagues arrived. But her boss, David, was already there, waiting in her office. Morning, he said as she entered. Got a minute to talk? Maya set down her bag, anxiety fluttering in her stomach. Was he upset about her absences? About the attention her story was getting? Of course, she said, taking a seat behind her desk. To her surprise, David looked concerned rather than annoyed. I've been following what's happening with the airline situation, he began. It seems to be gaining a lot of traction. Maya nodded cautiously. It's been unexpected. The board is meeting this afternoon, David continued. They want to discuss how the company should respond. Respond? Maya echoed, confused. Maya, you're one of our executive directors. What happened to you reflects on Thompson and Burke too, especially since you were traveling for company business. This hadn't occurred to Maya. She'd been so focused on her personal fight with the airline that she hadn't considered how her employer might view the situation. I'm not sure I understand, she said carefully. What kind of response are you talking about? David leaned forward. The board is considering issuing a statement of support for you and possibly reviewing our corporate relationship with the airline. We spend over $1 million annually on business travel with them. Maya felt a rush of emotion. Relief? That she wasn't being reprimanded, gratitude for the potential support, and a new sense of the leverage she might have that she hadn't recognized before. "I'd appreciate the company's support," she said. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about a pattern of discriminatory treatment that affects many travelers." David nodded. "That's how the board sees it too. No employee of ours should be treated that way while traveling on company business." He stood to leave. "I'll let you know what they decide. And Maya, take whatever time you need to address this. The Atlanta client was impressed with your presentation, by the way. They've asked for a follow-up proposal." After David left, Maya sat at her desk, processing this new development. Corporate pressure could be a powerful tool for change, perhaps even more effective than individual legal action. She opened her email to find dozens of new messages about the airline incident, including one from a civil rights organization offering support, and another from a tech expert who wanted to discuss the security system's potential algorithmic bias. One message in particular caught her attention, from a journalist at a major business publication who was investigating the airline's new security system and its implementation. The journalist had already spoken with 2 former employees who had raised concerns about the system during its testing phase, concerns that had apparently been ignored. Maya forwarded the email to Liam, then turned her attention to her actual job, drafting the follow-up proposal for the Atlanta client. But her mind kept returning to the growing movement her story had sparked. By lunchtime, she had made her decision about the TV interview. She would do it, not just to share her experience, but to represent all those who had reached out with similar stories. She called the producer who had contacted her and agreed to an interview the following morning. The producer was delighted, explaining that they wanted to do a segment on discriminatory practices in air travel, using Maya's story as the centerpiece. "We'd also like to include information about the broader pattern," the producer explained. "Would you be comfortable sharing some of the other stories you've received? Without naming names, of course." "Yes," Maya agreed. "This isn't just about my experience, it's about a systemic problem." After the call, Maya created a document summarizing the common themes from the stories people had shared with her: the public humiliation, the presumption of guilt, the dismissal of valid documentation, the disproportionate targeting of travelers of color. The patterns were clear and disturbing. That evening, as Maya was preparing to leave the office, David stopped by with news from the board meeting. "The company is issuing a statement tomorrow morning," he said. "Full support for you and a clear message that Thompson & Burke expects all vendors, including airlines, to treat our employees with respect and dignity." He handed her a draft of the statement. It was strongly worded, expressing deep concern about the incident and noting that the company would be re-evaluating our travel partnerships in light of these events. "Thank you," Maya said, genuinely moved by the show of support. "This means a lot." "There's more," David added. "The board has decided to suspend all business travel with the airline pending resolution of this issue. We're switching to their competitors effective immediately." Maya stared at him in surprise. "That's significant." "It's the right thing to do," David said simply. "And between us, 3 other companies in our network are considering similar actions. Corporate clients matter to airlines. Hit them in the wallet and they pay attention." The next morning, Maya sat in the makeup chair at the TV studio, trying to calm her nerves. The interview would be live, reaching millions of viewers across the country. "Just be yourself," the segment producer advised, stopping by for a final check. "Your story is compelling on its own. You don't need to embellish or dramatize anything." Maya nodded. She had prepared carefully, reviewing her notes and the key points she wanted to make. This wasn't just about sharing her experience. It was about advocating for change. The interview went better than she could have hoped. The host was respectful and well-prepared, asking thoughtful questions that allowed Maya to articulate not just what had happened to her, but the broader implications. "What do you hope comes from sharing your story?" the host asked, as the segment neared its end. "Accountability and change," Maya answered without hesitation. Accountability for how I was treated, yes, but more importantly, systemic change to ensure this doesn't keep happening to others. No one should be profiled or humiliated while simply trying to travel for work, or to visit family, or for any reason. After the interview, Maya's phone exploded with messages from friends and colleagues who had watched, from more travelers sharing similar experiences, and notably, from the airline's chief customer officer requesting an urgent meeting to address your concerns. By the time she reached Liam's office that afternoon, the landscape had shifted dramatically. Thompson & Burke's statement had been released and was being widely shared. 2 more major corporations had announced they were reviewing their relationships with the airline. The business publication was running a feature on the security system issues the following day. "You've created a perfect storm," Liam told her as they reviewed the developments. Corporate pressure, media attention, public outrage, and a growing body of evidence suggesting discriminatory impact. The airline has no choice but to take this seriously now. "So what's our next move?" Maya asked. "Now we negotiate," Liam said. "From a position of strength. We don't just want an apology and compensation for you, though you deserve both. We want systemic changes that will protect all travelers." Maya nodded, thinking of all the people who had reached out to share their stories. "That's exactly what I want too." As they began drafting their demands, a complete review of the security system, anti-bias training for all staff, clear complaint, procedures for passengers who experience discrimination, independent oversight of security practices, Maya reflected on how far things had come in just 1 week. What had begun as a humiliating experience at an airport checkpoint had evolved into a movement for accountability and change. She hadn't sought this role, but now that she had it, she was determined to use it effectively. The airline's representatives had scheduled a meeting for the following day. They would come face-to-face with Maya for the first time since the incident. And this time, she wouldn't be the one feeling powerless. This time she would be the one asking the hard questions, and she would accept nothing less than real answers and real change. The conference room at Liam's law office felt too small for the number of people gathered around the table. Maya sat beside Liam, facing 3 representatives from the airline, the chief customer officer, the head of airport operations, and their legal counsel. The tension in the room was palpable. "Thank you for meeting with us, Ms. Johnson," the chief customer officer began. His name was Paul Richardson, and his carefully neutral expression couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. "We take your experience very seriously and want to work toward a resolution." Maya nodded but said nothing. Liam had advised her to let them make the first substantive move. After reviewing the incident, Richardson continued, "We acknowledge that our staff did not handle the situation appropriately. The treatment you received fell far short of our service standards, and for that, we sincerely apologize. An apology is a start," Liam replied, "but it doesn't address the underlying issues. We have reason to believe this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of discriminatory treatment." The airline's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, leaned forward. "We categorically deny any systematic discrimination in our security procedures. The incident with Ms. Johnson resulted from a technical error in our new verification system, which has since been corrected. A technical error that somehow affected Ms. Johnson but not other passengers on the same flight," Liam challenged. "A technical error that led to her being publicly escorted through the terminal and interrogated for nearly an hour?" The head of airport operations, a gray-haired man named Robert Tanner, shifted uncomfortably. "The system flagged Ms. Johnson's ticket due to a coding issue with bookings made through certain corporate travel portals. It was unfortunate but not discriminatory in intent." Maya broke her silence. "Intent doesn't change impact, and it doesn't explain why I was treated like a criminal instead of a valued customer. It doesn't explain why the officers dismissed my documentation without proper review, or why they escorted me through a crowded terminal instead of discreetly addressing the issue." Richardson nodded, seeming to genuinely consider her words. "You're right, and that's where we failed. Regardless of the system flag, our staff should have handled the situation with more professionalism and sensitivity. We've already implemented additional training for all security personnel, Tanner added, "and we're reviewing our protocols for handling these situations." Liam opened a folder in front of him. "We've compiled statements from 27 other travelers who report similar experiences at O'Hare in the past 2 months. 23 of them are people of color. All had legitimate tickets that were flagged as suspicious. All describe being treated with suspicion and disrespect." He slid copies of the document across the table. The airline representatives exchanged glances as they skimmed the contents. "This suggests a pattern," Liam continued, "one that disproportionately impacts minority travelers. Whether it's due to biased algorithms in your security system or biased implementation by your staff, the effect is discriminatory." The lawyer started to object, but Richardson held up a hand to stop her. "We need to take this seriously," he said quietly. Then, looking directly at Maya, "What would you like to see happen here?" Maya had been preparing for this question. First, complete transparency about the security system, how it works, what triggers flags, and whether it's been tested for algorithmic bias. Second, a thorough independent review of all security incidents over the past 3 months to identify patterns. Third, comprehensive changes to your training and protocols to ensure all travelers are treated with dignity and respect. Richardson nodded slowly. "Those are reasonable requests. We can't share certain security details publicly, but we could allow an independent expert to review the system under a confidentiality agreement." The meeting continued for another hour, with detailed discussions about specific changes and timelines. By the end, they had the framework of an agreement. The airline would allow an independent audit of their security system, review their training protocols, and establish a clearer process for passengers to report discrimination. "We'll draft a formal agreement based on today's discussion," Liam said as the meeting concluded. "And we'll need regular updates on the implementation of these changes." They left the law office. Maya felt cautiously optimistic. The airline representatives had seemed genuinely committed to addressing the issues, though whether that stemmed from real concern or fear of negative publicity remained to be seen. "What do you think?" she asked Liam as they walked to the parking garage. "I think we've got their attention," he replied. "But the real work is just beginning. We need to make sure they follow through on these commitments." The next morning, Maya woke to breaking news. A major investigative journalism outlet had published an expose on discriminatory security practices across multiple airlines, featuring her story prominently. The article revealed internal documents showing that the new security system implemented at O'Hare had been rushed into operation despite concerns raised during testing about its high false positive rate. Most damning were emails from airline executives acknowledging that the system was flagging tickets purchased through discount vendors at a disproportionate rate, but pushing forward with implementation anyway due to pressure to enhance security measures. Maya's phone rang as she was reading the article. It was Liam. "Have you seen the news?" he asked without preamble. "I'm reading it now," she replied. "This is huge." "It changes everything," Liam agreed. "The airline can't claim ignorance anymore. They knew there were problems with the system and deployed it anyway. By midday, the story had been picked up by major news outlets across the country. The airline's stock price had dropped 7%. The Department of Transportation announced it was launching a formal investigation into the security practices. At O'Hare, Maya's inbox filled with interview requests from journalists, messages of support from other travelers, and even notes from airline employees who wanted to share their own concerns about the security protocols they were required to follow. One message stood out, an email from a data scientist who had worked on the development of the security system before leaving the company 6 months ago. The system was designed to flag potential fraud based on purchasing patterns, he wrote. But during testing, we discovered it was generating a disproportionate number of false positives for tickets purchased through certain channels, particularly discount vendors and resellers that serve predominantly lower income and minority communities. I raised these concerns repeatedly, but was told that the false positives were an acceptable trade-off for enhanced security. Maya forwarded the email to Liam, who immediately reached out to arrange a meeting with the data scientist. This first-hand account from someone who had worked on the system could be crucial evidence. As the media storm intensified, the airline's public relations team went into overdrive. They issued a statement announcing a complete review of their security procedures and promised to address any issues identified. They emphasized their commitment to treating all passengers with respect and dignity, regardless of race, gender, or background. But the corporate damage control came too late to prevent further fallout. By the end of the week, a class action lawsuit had been filed on behalf of travelers who believed they had been discriminated against by the airline's security practices. Several civil rights organizations issued statements condemning the airline and calling for industry-wide changes. Maya found herself at the center of a movement that was growing beyond anything she could have imagined when she first shared her story. She was invited to speak at a congressional hearing on discrimination in air travel. Civil rights leaders reached out to discuss collaboration on advocacy efforts. A tech ethics organization asked her to join a panel on algorithmic bias and its real-world impacts. "It's overwhelming," she admitted to Liam during a phone call 10 days after their meeting with the airline representatives. "I never expected any of this." "You've struck a chord," he replied. "People have been experiencing this kind of treatment for years but didn't have a way to be heard. You've given them a voice." The airline, meanwhile, was feeling the pressure from multiple directions. In addition to the public relations crisis and legal challenges, they were facing scrutiny from regulators and a significant financial impact as corporate clients continued to suspend their business relationships. 2 weeks after Maya's story first went viral, the airline's CEO requested a meeting with her and Liam. This was unprecedented. CEOs typically stayed far removed from individual customer complaints, protected by layers of corporate structure. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a conference room at a downtown hotel. The CEO, William Harrington, arrived with just one assistant, a departure from the team of executives and lawyers at the previous meeting. "Ms. Johnson," he began after introductions were complete, "I want to personally apologize for what you experienced. It was unacceptable and it has forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our operations." Maya nodded, waiting for him to continue. "After reviewing the evidence and listening to similar accounts from other passengers, we've come to recognize that our security system and protocols have had a discriminatory impact, whether that was the intention or not." He paused. "The results matter more than the intent, as you rightly pointed out." This acknowledgement, from the CEO himself, was significant. It went beyond the careful corporate language of the previous meeting to accept responsibility for the problem. "We're taking concrete steps to address these issues," Harrington continued. "We've suspended use of the flagging system pending a complete redesign with input from bias prevention experts. We're implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, and we're establishing an independent oversight committee to review our security practices on an ongoing basis." He slid a document across the table, a detailed plan outlining these changes, with specific timelines and accountability measures. "We'd like your input on this plan," he said to Maya. "You've experienced the problem firsthand and have heard from many others in similar situations. Your perspective would be invaluable in ensuring we get this right." Maya was surprised by the request. "You want me to help shape your reforms?" Harrington nodded. "If you're willing. We need to rebuild trust, and that starts with listening to the people we've failed." Maya looked at Liam, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "I'd need to review this plan in detail," she said carefully, "and I'd want to ensure that the voices of other affected travelers are included in the process as well." "Of course," Harrington agreed. "We're prepared to establish a formal advisory group, with compensation for participants' time and expertise." The discussion continued, with Maya raising specific concerns about the security protocols and suggesting additional measures to prevent similar incidents in the future. By the end of the meeting, a framework had been established for her ongoing involvement in the airline's reform efforts. As they left the hotel, Liam looked impressed. "They're serious about making changes," he observed. "Having the CEO directly involved is a strong signal, but is it enough?" Maya wondered. "Will it actually change the experience for travelers like me?" That's why your continued involvement is so important, Liam replied. To hold them accountable and ensure these reforms have real impact. In the weeks that followed, the story continued to unfold. The Department of Transportation's investigation expanded to include security practices at multiple airlines across several major airports. Congress scheduled hearings on discrimination in air travel, with Maya invited to testify about her experience. The data scientist who had reached out to Maya became a key whistleblower, providing detailed information about how the security system had been designed and implemented despite known issues. His testimony was crucial in establishing that the airline had been aware of the potential for discriminatory impact, but had proceeded anyway. Other travelers continued to come forward with their stories, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic discrimination that could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. Maya balanced her growing advocacy work with her professional responsibilities, grateful for her company's continued support. Thompson & Burke had become an unexpected ally in the fight for change, using its influence as a major corporate client to pressure the airline industry for reforms. 3 months after the incident at O'Hare, Maya stood before a congressional subcommittee sharing her story once again, but this time to lawmakers with the power to mandate industry-wide changes. What happened to me was not unique, she testified. It was part of a pattern that has affected countless travelers, particularly people of color. The evidence we've gathered demonstrates that discrimination in air travel security is not a series of isolated incidents, but a systemic problem requiring systemic solutions. She outlined the changes the airline had begun to implement, acknowledging their efforts while emphasizing the need for industry-wide reforms and ongoing oversight. No traveler should be treated as suspicious because of their race or background, she concluded. Everyone deserves dignity and respect when navigating our transportation systems. As she left the hearing room surrounded by supporters and media, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a humiliating experience at an airport checkpoint had evolved into a movement for change that was reshaping policies and practices across the airline industry. The work wasn't finished, meaningful. Reform would require continued vigilance and advocacy, but the momentum was undeniable. The conversation had shifted from questioning whether discrimination existed in air travel security to actively addressing how to eliminate it. For Maya, this was just the beginning. The platform she had been given came with responsibility to represent the voices of those who had experienced similar treatment, to push for accountability and meaningful change, to ensure that the reforms promised would actually be implemented. She walked out of the Capitol building into the bright afternoon sunlight, ready for whatever came next in this unexpected journey toward justice. 6 months had passed since that morning at O'Hare when Maya's life had taken an unexpected turn. Now she stood in the bright lights of a hotel ballroom, adjusting her notes at the podium as cameras flashed and journalists settled into their seats. Beside her stood William Harrington, the airline's CEO, looking simultaneously nervous and determined. "Thank you all for coming today," Maya began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Public speaking had become a regular part of her life over the past months. But this press conference felt different. This was the culmination of months of work, negotiation, and advocacy. 6 months ago, I was wrongfully detained at O'Hare International Airport, accused of traveling with fraudulent documentation despite having a legitimate ticket. What began as a personal humiliation became something much larger when I discovered that my experience was not unique. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Among the journalists, she could see Liam, who gave her an encouraging nod, and several members of the newly formed Travelers' Equity Alliance, other passengers who had experienced similar discrimination and joined her advocacy efforts. Today, I'm here alongside representatives from the airline to announce a comprehensive settlement and reform package that we believe will create meaningful change in how all passengers are treated. Maya stepped back, and Harrington moved to the microphone. The CEO looked more humble than he had at their first meeting, the past months of public scrutiny and internal reflection evident in his demeanor. First and foremost, he began, I want to again apologize to Ms. Johnson and to all passengers who have experienced discrimination while traveling with our airline. These incidents represent profound failures on our part. Failures we are committed to addressing with concrete action, not just words. He outlined the settlement agreement, which included not only financial compensation for affected passengers, but more importantly, a detailed reform package that would transform the airline's approach to security and customer treatment. We are completely replacing our ticket verification system with new technology that has been rigorously tested for algorithmic bias. Harrington explained, this new system, developed with input from both security experts and civil rights advocates, maintains necessary security measures while eliminating the patterns of false positives that disproportionately affected certain groups of travelers. Maya listened carefully as he detailed the other changes. Mandatory quarterly anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, new protocols requiring respectful, discreet handling of any documentation concerns, a streamlined complaint process for passengers who believe they have experienced discrimination, and perhaps most significantly, an independent oversight board with the authority to review security practices and ensure ongoing compliance with anti-discrimination standards. Ms. Johnson will serve as the inaugural chair of this oversight board, Harrington announced, bringing her first-hand experience and advocacy expertise to guide our continued improvement. When it was Maya's turn to speak again, she emphasized that these changes, while significant, were just the beginning. This agreement with one airline represents progress, but our goal is industry-wide reform, she stated clearly. The Travelers' Equity Alliance will continue to advocate for similar changes across all airlines and airports, because every traveler deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or background. After the formal statements, reporters shouted questions. Maya and Harrington answered them together, a visible symbol of the collaborative approach that had eventually emerged from adversarial beginnings. Ms. Johnson called a reporter from a major news network. Do you believe these changes will actually prevent discrimination in the future? Maya considered the question carefully. I believe they create a strong foundation for improvement. The independent oversight, in particular, ensures accountability beyond this moment of public attention. But lasting change requires ongoing vigilance and a fundamental shift in culture. That's why I've agreed to remain involved as chair of the oversight board. And Mr. Harrington, another journalist asked, how do you respond to criticism that these changes are merely a public relations move rather than a genuine commitment to equity? The CEO nodded, having clearly anticipated this question. The proof will be in our actions over time, not in my words today. That's why we've agreed to public quarterly reports on our progress, regular independent audits, and the oversight board with real authority. We're also committing substantial resources, over $30 million in the first year alone, to implement these changes properly. As the press conference concluded, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction at the concrete changes secured, pride in the movement she had helped build, but also awareness of how much work remained ahead. Liam approached as the crowd began to disperse. You did it, he said, giving her a quick hug. When you walked into my office 6 months ago, did you ever imagine this outcome? Maya shook her head. Never. I just wanted someone to acknowledge what had happened and make sure it didn't happen. To others, I had no idea it would lead to all of this. That's how change often works, Liam observed. One person refuses to be silenced, and suddenly everyone who's been suffering in silence finds their voice too. They were interrupted by Harrington, who came over to shake Maya's hand. Thank you for your persistence, he said, sounding genuinely grateful. It would have been easier for you to accept a private settlement and move on. Your insistence on systemic change has made our airline better. Implementation is what matters now, Maya replied, firm, but not antagonistic. Their relationship had evolved over months of difficult but ultimately productive negotiations. I know, he agreed. We have a lot to prove, but I'm committed to getting this right. After the CEO walked away, Tanya, the airline employee who had first reached out, Maya, with insider information, approached cautiously. She had eventually agreed to testify in the Department of Transportation investigation, a decision that had put her job at risk, but ultimately helped secure broader reforms. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "There were times I didn't think the company would ever admit there was a problem, let alone agree to these kinds of changes. Your courage made a huge difference," Maya told her. "Without your evidence about how the system was flagging certain tickets, we might never have proven the pattern." The hotel ballroom gradually emptied as journalists rushed off to file their stories and airline representatives returned to their offices to begin implementing the newly announced changes. Maya gathered her notes and belongings, preparing to head back to her own office. Despite her increasingly public role as an advocate, she had maintained her position at Thompson & Burke, balancing her marketing career with her advocacy work. David was waiting in the hotel lobby, having watched the press conference from the back of the room. As her boss and now friend, he had been a steady source of support throughout the past months. "The board is impressed," he told her as they walked to the parking garage. "Not just with the outcome, but with how you've handled the entire situation. Principled but not punitive, focused on creating change rather than just winning a fight." Maya appreciated the validation. "It's been a delicate balance. I never wanted to destroy the airline. I just wanted them to acknowledge the problem and fix it. And in the process, you've built something remarkable," David added. "The Travelers' Equity Alliance has real momentum. Where do you see it going? From here?" It was a question Maya had been considering carefully. What had begun as a response to her personal experience had grown into a national movement with real influence. The alliance now included hundreds of members across the country, with chapters forming in major cities to address discrimination issues in all forms of transportation. "We're meeting with executives from 2 other airlines next week," she told David. "They've seen what happened here and reached out proactively about reviewing their own systems. And we're working with legislators on potential regulations that would mandate anti-bias testing for security technologies across the industry." When Maya arrived home that evening, she found a small package waiting at her door, a gift from her parents, who had been her strongest supporters throughout the ordeal. Inside was a framed quote from Maya Angelou: "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." The quote brought tears to her eyes. 6 months ago, she had been humiliated and angry, sitting in a hotel room in Atlanta documenting an injustice she had experienced. She could have let that moment reduce her, could have accepted a private apology and compensation and tried to put the experience behind her. Instead, she had chosen to speak up, not just for herself but for everyone who had faced similar treatment. That choice had transformed a painful experience into a powerful movement for change. Maya placed the framed quote on her desk, next to her computer where she would see it daily. Then she opened her laptop to review the agenda for tomorrow's meeting of the Travelers' Equity Alliance. They had accomplished something significant today, but it was just one airline, one set of reforms. The broader work was just beginning. 1 month later, Maya stood in a community center in Chicago's South Side, facing a room full of local residents who had gathered to learn about their rights while traveling. This kind of grassroots education had become a central part of the Alliance's work, empowering travelers with knowledge about their rights and how to document and report discriminatory treatment. "Knowledge is power," Maya told the audience. "When you know what proper procedures look like, you can more easily identify when they're not being followed. When you know your rights, you can assert them more effectively." She walked the group through practical strategies: how to document incidents, which agencies handled different types of complaints, what kinds of evidence were most helpful. A local civil rights attorney volunteered their time to answer specific legal questions. These community workshops were happening in cities across the country now, organized by Alliance members who had experienced discrimination firsthand and were determined to help others navigate similar situations. After the workshop, a young woman approached Maya hesitantly. "My mother was detained at security last year," she said. "They claimed her documentation was suspicious even though she's a legal permanent resident who's lived here for 20 years. She was so humiliated she hasn't traveled since." Maya listened, with empathy, having heard many similar stories over the past months. The whole experience broke something in her, the young woman continued. She used to be so confident, but now she's afraid to even go to the airport. Seeing you on the news standing up to the airline, it gave her hope that things might actually change. These personal stories reinforced Maya's commitment to the work, reminding her of the human impact behind the statistics and policy discussions. Every reform implemented, every staff member trained, every security system redesigned represented real people who would be treated with more dignity and respect. 2 months after the press conference, Maya sat in a congressional hearing room, testifying before lawmakers considering new regulations for transportation security technologies. She had prepared extensive remarks about the need for mandatory anti-bias testing and ongoing monitoring of security systems. The technology itself isn't neutral, she explained to the committee. It reflects the biases, conscious or unconscious, of the people who design it and the data used to train it. Without proper safeguards, these systems can automate and amplify discrimination while providing the false comfort of seeming objectivity. Her testimony was followed by technical experts who detailed specific methods for testing algorithms for discriminatory impact, and by legal scholars who outlined potential regulatory frameworks. The hearing represented a shift in the conversation, from addressing individual incidents to creating systemic protections. After the hearing, a senior legislator approached Maya. "Your advocacy has changed minds here," she said quietly. "Before your case brought attention to this issue, many of my colleagues didn't believe discrimination in air travel was a real problem. They saw it as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. You've made it impossible to maintain that fiction." Back in Chicago, Maya divided her time between her marketing career, her role chairing the airline's oversight board, and her leadership of the growing Travelers' Equity Alliance. The balance wasn't always easy, but each role informed and strengthened the others. Her experience as a marketing executive helped her craft compelling messages about travel equity. Her inside perspective on the airline's operations allowed her to advocate more effectively for industry-wide changes, and her work with the Alliance kept her connected to the real experiences of travelers, ensuring she never lost sight of the human impact of policies and practices. 1 year after the incident at O'Hare, Maya returned to the airport for the unveiling of a new passenger rights center, a direct result of the reforms she had helped secure. The center provided a space where travelers could report concerns, access information about their rights, and get real-time assistance with any issues. Similar centers were being established at airports across the country, creating infrastructure to support more equitable treatment for all travelers. They represented a tangible symbol of the changes that had occurred over the past year, changes that went beyond policy documents to create real resources for passengers. As Maya cut the ribbon to officially open the center, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a humiliating experience had evolved into a movement that was reshaping the travel industry in meaningful ways. The airline that had once detained her was now leading the industry. Inequitable practices, their reformed approach serving as a model for others. The security system that had falsely flagged her ticket had been replaced with technology specifically designed to avoid discriminatory impacts. The staff who had treated her with suspicion and disrespect had been retrained or replaced. And perhaps, most significantly, travelers who experienced discrimination now had resources, recourse, and a community ready to support them. They were no longer isolated in their experiences, forced to either accept mistreatment or fight lonely battles for accountability. After the ceremony, Maya stepped outside onto the sidewalk where her ordeal had begun a year earlier. The airport looked the same glass doors, the same flow of travelers with their luggage, the same bustle of activity. But what happened inside those doors was changing, slowly but meaningfully. One person's refusal to be silenced had sparked a movement. One painful experience had been transformed into positive change. One moment of injustice had led to greater justice for countless travelers. As Maya watched a diverse stream of passengers entering the airport, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The work wasn't finished. Meaningful change never happened overnight. But they were making progress, step by step, toward a world where everyone could travel with dignity, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. She checked her watch and smiled. It was time to head inside. She had a flight to catch and important work waiting on the other side.